My name is Linda, and I'm 29 years old. Right now, I'm sitting in a lawyer's office signing papers to cancel every financial support I've given my sister over the past 4 years. The tuition payments, the co-signed lease, the credit cards, everything. My hand is shaking as I write my signature because 3 weeks ago she destroyed my wedding day in the most humiliating way possible. She threw champagne at me, smashed my cake, and screamed that I thought I was better than everyone. My mom hugged her and said she just needed to let it out. I said nothing. But what happened at 7:30 that morning changed everything. Before I tell you what led to this moment, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories. Trust me, you won't believe how this all unfolded. Growing up, my sister Cheryl and I couldn't have been more different. I was the responsible one, the one who did homework without being asked, who got a part-time job at 16 to save for college, who never caused drama. Cheryl was 5 years younger and somehow managed to be the center of attention in every room she entered. She was beautiful, charming, and knew exactly how to get what she wanted from our parents. When we were kids, I didn't mind it much. I actually enjoyed taking care of her, helping with her homework, braiding her hair before school. Our dad used to call me his little helper, and Cheryl his little princess. It seemed harmless back then. But as we got older, the dynamic became more pronounced. I worked my way through community college, then transferred to a 4-year university where I studied accounting. I graduated with minimal debt because I worked 25 hours a week at a bookstore while maintaining a 3.8 GPA. Cheryl, meanwhile, was busy being homecoming queen and dating the captain of the football team. When our dad died suddenly from a heart attack 3 years ago, everything changed. Mom was devastated, barely able to function for months. Someone had to step up, and that someone was me. I had just landed my first real job as a junior accountant at a financial firm in downtown Chicago, making $42,000 a year. It wasn't much, but it was steady. Cheryl was starting her sophomore year at Northwestern University studying communications. The tuition was $45,000 a year, not including room and board. Dad had always promised he'd pay for her education, and even though he was gone, I couldn't bear the thought of her having to drop out or transfer to a cheaper school. So I took over the payments. Every month I sent a check for $3,750 to Northwestern. I also co-signed the lease for her trendy studio apartment near campus because she insisted the dorms were too restricting. The rent was $2,800 a month, which I thought was absolutely insane for a glorified closet with a Murphy bed. But Cheryl said all her friends lived off campus. On top of that, I set up a credit card in her name with me as the guarantor. I told her it was for emergencies only, but somehow emergencies included weekly shopping trips, expensive dinners, and spring break vacations I could never afford myself. The math was simple and devastating. Between tuition, rent, and her monthly expenses, I was spending over $6,000 a month on my sister. That was more than half my take-home pay. I was living in a tiny one-bedroom apartment that cost $800 a month, driving a 12-year-old Honda Civic, and buying generic groceries to make ends meet. But every time I thought about saying something, I remembered Dad's funeral. Cheryl had sobbed so hard she could barely stand. She was only 21 and had never faced real hardship. I convinced myself I was protecting her, helping her through a difficult time until she could stand on her own feet. The problem was, Cheryl never seemed grateful. If anything, she acted like my support was a given, something she deserved. When I mentioned feeling stressed about money, she'd roll her eyes and say things like, "You're so lucky to have a boring, stable job. Must be nice to never take risks or chase your dreams." Chase her dreams. As if my dreams didn't matter. As if working 60-hour weeks to pay for her dreams was somehow lucky. The worst part was watching her social media. Photos of expensive brunches, designer clothes, weekend trips to Wisconsin Dells with her sorority sisters. Meanwhile, I was eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch every day, and hadn't bought myself new clothes in over a year. But I kept quiet. I kept paying. I told myself it was temporary, that she'd graduate soon, and everything would change. When I got engaged to Michael after 4 years of dating, I thought Cheryl would be happy for me. Michael was a software engineer, kind and stable, everything I'd hoped for in a partner. We'd met at a coffee shop near my office where he was working on his laptop every morning. Our relationship had grown slowly and steadily, built on shared values and genuine affection. The night Michael proposed, I called Cheryl immediately. I was so excited I could barely get the words out. There was a long pause before she said, "Wow, another thing you get first as usual." The way she said it made my stomach drop. I tried to laugh it off, telling her how I couldn't wait for her to be my maid of honor, how special it would be to have my sister standing beside me. "I guess," she said flatly. "When's the wedding?" We set the date for 8 months away, which I thought would give us plenty of time to plan everything perfectly. I'd been dreaming of my wedding day since I was little, picturing myself in a beautiful dress, surrounded by family and friends, finally having something that was just for me. I asked Cheryl to be my maid of honor the next week over dinner at our mom's house. She accepted, but I could see something was bothering her. When I started talking about wedding plans, she kept interrupting with suggestions that would completely change my vision. "Pink is so basic," she said when I showed her the dusty rose bridesmaid dresses I'd picked out. "What about emerald green? It would look amazing with my complexion." "I want the ceremony at 4 in the afternoon," I explained, "so we can have golden hour photos." "That's so inconvenient," Cheryl complained. "People will have to take time off work. Evening weddings are much more elegant." Every suggestion I made was met with criticism or demands for changes. When I mentioned wanting to have the reception at a charming historic mansion, I'd found Cheryl immediately pulled up photos of an ultra-modern venue downtown that cost twice as much. "This place has much better Instagram potential," she said, showing me pictures of floor-to-ceiling windows and sleek marble floors. I tried to compromise where I could, but I realized this was my wedding, not hers. When I gently insisted on keeping my original plans, Cheryl's attitude grew colder. She started showing up late to wedding planning appointments when she showed up at all. She'd leave my calls unanswered for days, then text back with one-word responses. The worst incident happened at my bridal shower 2 months before the wedding. My mom and I had planned a lovely afternoon at a tea room, inviting 20 of my closest friends and family members. Everything was perfect until Cheryl arrived 2 hours late, clearly having been drinking. She stumbled into the tea room wearing ripped jeans and a crop top, completely inappropriate for the elegant venue. I tried to play it off, hugging her and thanking her for coming, but she immediately launched into a loud story about the party she'd been at the night before. "So I was totally wasted," she announced to the table of my work colleagues and elderly aunts. "And this guy tried to take me home, but I was like, no way, I need to be functional for my sister's boring tea party." The room went silent. My face burned with embarrassment as she continued describing her hangover in graphic detail. When it came time to open gifts, she made sarcastic comments about each one. When my future mother-in-law gave me a beautiful set of china, Cheryl snorted and said, "How domestic. I guess some people really do want to turn into their mothers." My mom kept shooting me apologetic looks, but she didn't say anything to correct Cheryl's behavior. Later, when I tried to talk to her about it, Mom made excuses. "She's just stressed about finals," she said. "You know how she gets when she feels left out. This is a big transition for her too, watching her big sister get married." I wanted to scream. Feeling left out, I'd included her in every aspect of the planning. I'd asked her opinion on everything from flowers to music. The only thing I hadn't done was let her take over my entire wedding. But I swallowed my frustration and kept hoping that on the actual wedding day, she'd step up and be the sister I needed her to be. The morning of my wedding started perfectly. I woke up at 6:30 feeling nervous, but excited, the kind of anticipation I'd been looking forward to for months. The weather was ideal, 72 degrees with clear skies. Michael had stayed at his brother's house the night before, so I had our apartment to myself to get ready. My wedding party was supposed to meet at the venue at 9 to start hair and makeup. I arrived early with my mom, who seemed almost as excited as I was. She kept tearing up and saying how proud Dad would have been to walk me down the aisle. 9 o'clock came and went. 9:15. 9:30. Finally, at 9:45, Cheryl stumbled through the door of the bridal suite, looking like she'd slept in her clothes. Her hair was tangled, her makeup was smudged, and she was wearing the same outfit from the night before. "Sorry," she mumbled, not making eye contact. "I had a rough night." The makeup artist looked concerned. "Honey, we need to get you cleaned up before we can start. Do you want to take a shower first?" Cheryl rolled her eyes. "I'm fine. Just do whatever you need to do." For the next 3 hours, while my other bridesmaids chatted and laughed and helped create the joyful atmosphere I'd imagined, Cheryl sat in the corner complaining. The makeup was too heavy. The hairstylist was pulling too tight. The dress was uncomfortable. She kept making comments about how long everything was taking, how she was hungry, how she wished she'd brought her phone charger. I tried to stay positive, focusing on the fact that in a few hours I'd be married to the man I loved. My other bridesmaids, my college roommate Sarah and my cousin Jennifer, did their best to keep the energy up, but Cheryl's negativity was like a dark cloud hanging over the room. The ceremony itself went beautifully. Walking down the aisle on my mom's arm, I felt like I was floating. Michael's face when he saw me made all the stress of the morning worth it. Our vows were heartfelt, our families cried happy tears, and for 30 minutes everything was exactly as I dreamed it would be. The reception started smoothly too. Cocktail hour was perfect, with guests mingling and complimenting the venue and the flowers. I finally started to relax, thinking maybe the worst was behind us. That's when the maid of honor speech happened. Cheryl stood up during dinner, tapping her champagne glass with her knife. The room quieted down as she cleared her throat and smiled that charming smile that had gotten her out of trouble her whole life. "I want to say a few words about my sister Linda," she began, and I felt a flutter of hope. Maybe this was when she'd finally show the love and support I'd been waiting for. "Linda has always been the responsible one in our family." Cheryl continued, her voice steady, but something cold lurking underneath. "She's always been the one who does everything right, who follows all the rules, who makes all the safe choices." The room was listening attentively. Michael squeezed my hand under the table. "And she's always been the one who gets everything she wants." Cheryl's voice was getting sharper now. "The perfect grades, the perfect job, the perfect man, the perfect life. Some of us aren't so lucky to have everything just fall into place like that." I felt my stomach start to churn. This wasn't going where I'd hoped. "So here's to Linda." Cheryl raised her glass higher, and I noticed her hand was shaking slightly. "Who always lands on her feet, who never has to worry about money or failure or disappointment. Must be nice to be the golden child." The room was getting uncomfortable now. I could see confused faces, people glancing at each other uncertainly. Michael's grip on my hand tightened. Then Cheryl looked directly at me, and the mask finally slipped completely. "This is what you get for acting like you're better than everyone," she screamed, and before I could process what was happening, she'd grabbed her champagne glass and thrown the entire contents directly at me. The cold liquid hit my face and soaked into my wedding dress, the beautiful silk gown I'd saved for months to buy. Gasps echoed through the room as guests jumped back in shock. But Cheryl wasn't done. She stumbled toward the wedding cake, our beautiful 3-tier vanilla and raspberry creation that had cost $800. With both hands, she shoved it off the table, sending it crashing to the floor in an explosion of frosting and flowers. "There," she shouted, standing over the wreckage. "Now your perfect day isn't so perfect anymore." The room erupted in chaos. Some guests were standing, others were pulling out their phones. Everyone was talking at once. I sat frozen in my chair, champagne dripping from my hair, staring at the ruins of my wedding cake scattered across the floor. And then, as if this nightmare couldn't get any worse, my mother rushed to Cheryl's side and wrapped her in a hug. "Oh, sweetie," Mom cooed, stroking Cheryl's hair as she sobbed dramatically. "It's okay. You just needed to let it out. I know this is hard for you." I stared at them in disbelief. Let it out. Hard for her. This was my wedding day, and my mother was comforting the person who had just destroyed it. Michael stood up and tried to put his arm around me, but I barely felt it. I was numb watching my family prioritize my sister's feelings over the humiliation she'd just put me through in front of 120 people. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. I just sat there in my ruined dress, watching my mom console my sister, while our guests whispered and stared and probably wished they'd never come. The rest of the reception was a disaster. Half the guests left early. Those who stayed spent the evening talking about what they'd witnessed instead of celebrating. We had no cake to cut, no joyful toasts, no magical first dance, just awkward conversations and pitying looks. The day I dreamed about my entire life was over, and all I had to show for it was a stained dress and the memory of my sister's rage. Michael and I barely spoke on the way to our honeymoon suite at the downtown hotel. What was supposed to be the most romantic night of our lives felt hollow and strange. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing my ruined wedding dress, staring at the champagne stains that had dried into dark blotches across the silk. "I can't believe she did that," Michael said, finally loosening his tie. "And I can't believe your mom just let her get away with it." I wanted to defend my family, but I couldn't find the words. Deep down, I wasn't even surprised. This was the pattern we'd followed my entire life. Cheryl acted out, caused chaos, hurt people, and everyone rushed to make excuses for her while expecting me to understand and forgive. "She's been under so much pressure," Mom had said when she pulled me aside during the reception cleanup. "You know she loves you. She's just been struggling with watching you move on to this new phase of life. Try to have some compassion." Compassion. For the person who had humiliated me in front of everyone I cared about on the most important day of my life. Michael wanted to go confront Cheryl immediately, but I stopped him. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and I needed time to think. We ordered room service and tried to salvage something of our wedding night, but the magic was gone. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Cheryl's face twisted with rage, heard her voice screaming that I thought I was better than everyone. I replayed every moment of our relationship, every sacrifice I'd made, every time I'd prioritized her needs over my own. By 6 a.m, I was wide awake with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I got up carefully, trying not to wake Michael, and went to the hotel business center with my laptop. For the next 2 hours, I researched everything. Co-signed lease termination procedures, university tuition refund policies, credit card cancellation processes. I took notes, made phone calls, gathered information. The tuition payment for Cheryl's senior year was due in 3 weeks. I'd already transferred $15,000 to cover the fall semester deposit. I discovered that I could still withdraw that payment with a penalty fee, but it was possible. The lease she'd signed for her apartment ran through next May, but because I was the co-signer, I had certain rights. If I formally removed myself from the lease, she'd have 30 days to find a new guarantor or vacate the property. The credit card was the easiest. Since I was the primary account holder, I could freeze it immediately. It felt surreal sitting in that hotel business center in my pajamas at 7 a.m, methodically dismantling the financial safety net I'd built for my sister over the past 4 years. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was taking control of my own life. I called the bank first. "I need to stop payment on a scheduled transfer," I told the customer service representative. Next was the credit card company. "I'd like to freeze all activity on this account immediately." Then the property management company. "I need information about removing myself as a co-signer from a lease." Each phone call felt like lifting a weight off my shoulders. By the time Michael woke up, I'd canceled or frozen every financial commitment I'd made to support Cheryl's lifestyle. When I told him what I'd done, he was quiet for a long time. "Are you sure about this?" he asked finally. I thought about my wedding dress hanging in the closet, probably ruined beyond repair. I thought about the cake scattered across the floor, the guests who'd left early, the humiliation that would follow me for years. "I'm sure," I said. It took exactly 6 hours for Cheryl to find out what I'd done. The university called her first when the tuition payment was declined. Then the credit card company when she tried to buy lunch and her card was rejected. By the time the property management company contacted her about the lease situation, she was in a full panic. My phone started ringing at 2 in the afternoon. I let it go to voicemail. "Linda, what the hell is going on?" Cheryl's voice was shaky and high-pitched. "The school is saying my tuition payment didn't go through. My credit card isn't working. Call me back right now." The second voicemail came an hour later, more frantic. "Linda, I'm serious. I don't know what kind of mistake happened, but you need to fix this immediately. I have bills due and classes start Monday. This isn't funny." By the third voicemail, she'd figured it out. "How could you do this to me?" She was crying now, her voice broken and desperate. "How could you destroy my entire life because you're mad about one stupid mistake at your wedding? You're ruining my future. I'll have to drop out of school. I'll lose my apartment. How can you be this cruel to your own sister?" I listened to each message with a strange sense of detachment. For years I'd dreaded the thought of Cheryl being upset with me, had bent over backwards to avoid her anger or disappointment. Now, hearing her panic, I felt nothing but a cold satisfaction. Then my mom called. "Linda Marie, you need to call me back right now," she said in the voice she'd used when I was in trouble as a child. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is going too far. Your sister is devastated. She called me sobbing, saying you've cut off all her money and she's going to have to drop out of college. How can you be so vindictive? I raised you better than this." Vindictive. That word hit me like a slap. After everything I'd done for my family, after sacrificing my own financial security for years to support my sister, after being humiliated and disrespected at my own wedding, I was vindictive for finally setting boundaries. I didn't call anyone back that day. Instead, Michael and I went on our planned honeymoon activities, visiting the Art Institute, and having dinner at a nice restaurant. It was strange, almost surreal to be going through the motions of celebrating while my phone buzzed constantly with increasingly desperate messages. The next morning, Cheryl showed up at our hotel. I was in the lobby waiting for Michael to check us out when I saw her storming through the revolving doors. She looked terrible, her hair unwashed, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She spotted me immediately and marched over, her face flushed with rage. "How dare you?" she hissed, stopping just inches from my face. "How dare you destroy my life because you can't handle one moment of honesty?" Honesty. I stood up slowly, meeting her eyes. "Is that what you call screaming at me and destroying my wedding?" "I was drunk and emotional," she shot back. "People say things they don't mean when they're upset. But what you're doing now is calculated and cruel. You're trying to ruin my entire future because your feelings got hurt." I looked at this person who shared my DNA, who I'd loved and protected and sacrificed for, and I realized I barely recognized her. The entitlement, the selfishness, the complete inability to take responsibility for her actions was staggering. "Your entire future was built on my money," I said quietly. "Money I earned working 60-hour weeks while you partied and traveled and acted like you deserved everything I gave you. I'm not ruining your future, Cheryl. I'm just not funding it anymore." "You can't do this to me," she screamed loud enough that other hotel guests were starting to stare. "I'm your sister. I need you." "You should have thought about that before you threw champagne at me in front of 120 people, I replied. Michael appeared at my side, then car keys in hand. Cheryl's eyes flicked to him with pure hatred. "This is your fault," she spat. "You turned her against her own family. Before you came along, she cared about the people who actually mattered." "The people who actually mattered," I repeated slowly. "You mean the people who stood by and watched you humiliate me, then made excuses for your behavior? Those people—" Cheryl's face crumpled. "I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry about the wedding. I was jealous and stupid, and I handled it badly. But you can't punish me forever for one mistake." "This isn't punishment," I told her. "This is me realizing that I've been enabling you for so long that you've forgotten how to take care of yourself. You're 24 years old, Cheryl. It's time to figure out how to be an adult." She stared at me for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. Then her expression hardened. "Fine," she said. "But don't expect me to forgive you for this. And don't expect Mom to either. You're choosing money over family, and that's something we'll never forget." She turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing across the marble lobby floor. I watched her go, waiting to feel guilty or sad or some urge to chase after her and fix everything. Instead, I felt lighter than I had in years. 3 weeks passed in relative quiet. My mom called a few times, her voice cold and disappointed, updating me on Cheryl's situation, as if I were somehow responsible for solving it. Cheryl had moved in with a friend temporarily, was working at a restaurant to make ends meet, and had enrolled in community college because she couldn't afford Northwestern's tuition. "She's sleeping on a couch and working double shifts," Mom told me during one particularly guilt-laden phone call. "Is this really what you wanted, to see your sister struggling just to survive?" I wanted to point out that I'd been struggling to survive for years while supporting both myself and Cheryl, but I kept that observation to myself. I was done justifying my decisions to people who'd never appreciated the sacrifices I'd made. Michael and I settled back into our normal routine. For the first time in years, I had extra money in my checking account. I bought myself new clothes, got my hair done at a nice salon, even started putting money into a savings account for our future. It was amazing how much easier life became when I wasn't hemorrhaging $6,000 a month. I was sleeping better too, no longer lying awake at night worrying about Cheryl's next financial crisis, or my mom's disappointed sighs when I couldn't afford to do more. The constant anxiety that had become my normal state of being began to fade. Then 3 weeks and 2 days after my wedding, everything changed. I was getting ready for work on a Tuesday morning when the doorbell rang at exactly 7:30. Michael had already left for the office, so I figured it was a package delivery, or maybe a neighbor with a maintenance issue. I wrapped my robe around myself and went to answer the door. Instead of a delivery person, I found a young man in a baseball cap holding a large manila envelope. "Linda Morrison?" he asked, checking a clipboard. "Yes, that's me." "Certified delivery," he said, handing me the envelope and a pen to sign for it. "Have a good day?" I closed the door and stared at the envelope, my name written across the front in handwriting I recognized immediately. Cheryl's careful cursive, the same handwriting that had adorned birthday cards and thank you notes throughout our childhood. Inside the envelope were 2 things: a handwritten letter on notebook paper and a cashier's check for $3,000. My hands were shaking as I unfolded the letter. "Dear Linda," it began, "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and I understand why. I've been sitting here for 3 weeks trying to figure out how to write this, how to explain everything that's been going through my head since the wedding." I sat down at my kitchen table, the morning light streaming through the windows as I continued reading. "First, I want to apologize for what I did at your wedding. Not just say sorry, but really apologize, because I understand now how much I hurt you. I was drunk, yes, but that's not an excuse. I was jealous and angry, and I took it out on you in the most horrible way possible. You deserved to have a perfect wedding day, and I stole that from you. I can never give that back, and I will regret it for the rest of my life." I had to stop reading for a moment. This didn't sound like the Cheryl I knew, the one who made excuses and blamed everyone else for her problems. "I want you to know that I got a job 3 days after you cut off my funding. It's at a little diner called Mel's, about 2 miles from campus. I work the breakfast and lunch shifts, usually about 50 hours a week. It's hard work, harder than I've ever done before, but I'm learning things about myself that I never knew." The letter continued for 3 pages, describing her new life in detail. She was sharing a tiny studio apartment with 2 roommates, sleeping on an air mattress and eating ramen noodles most nights. She'd withdrawn from Northwestern and enrolled in community college, where she was studying business administration with a focus on restaurant management. "I realized I'd never actually earned anything in my life," she wrote. "Everything I had, Everything I thought I was built on your hard work and sacrifice. When that support disappeared, I had to face the reality of who I really was without it. And I didn't like what I found. But the most surprising part came near the end. The check I'm sending you is from my first month of work. It's not much, I know. It doesn't even begin to cover what you've given me over the years. I did the math, Linda. $180,000. You spent $180,000 of your own money supporting me while I acted like you owed it to me. $180,000. Seeing the number written out in her handwriting made it real in a way it had never been before. I can't pay it all back right away, but I want to try. More than that, I want to earn the right to be your sister again. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm hoping that maybe someday you'll be proud of the person I'm becoming. The person I should have been all along. The letter was signed simply, Love, Cheryl, followed by a postscript. P.S. I know this doesn't make up for anything, but I wanted you to know that I told Mom the truth about everything. About how much money you'd been giving me, about how ungrateful I'd been, about how wrong I was at the wedding. She's starting to understand what really happened. It might take time, but I think she's beginning to see how much you sacrificed for our family. I read the letter 3 times, holding the cashier's check with my free hand. $3,000 represented over a month of work at minimum wage, plus tips money that Cheryl desperately needed for rent and food and basic necessities. Yet she'd sent it to me. I called in sick to work that day. I couldn't concentrate on spreadsheets and budget reports when my entire understanding of my relationship with my sister had been turned upside down. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table reading Cheryl's letter over and over, trying to reconcile this thoughtful, self-aware person with the angry, entitled woman who had destroyed my wedding. Michael came home at lunch to check on me, thinking I was actually ill. "What's wrong?" he asked, finding me still in my robe at the table. I handed him the letter without saying anything. He read it twice, then looked at the check, then back at me. "Wow," he said finally. "I have to admit, I didn't see this coming." Neither did I. My voice felt strange, like I was talking through cotton. "I don't know what to do with this." Michael sat down across from me, studying my face carefully. "What do you want to do?" That was the question, wasn't it? For 3 weeks, I'd been so sure of my decision, so confident that cutting Cheryl off was the right thing to do. I'd felt strong and vindicated and free. But this letter changed everything, didn't it? Or did it? "I don't know if I can trust her," I said finally. "This could be manipulation. She could be saying what she thinks I want to hear to get her money back." "It could be," Michael agreed. "But does it feel like manipulation to you?" I thought about that. Cheryl had always been skilled at getting what she wanted from people, at playing on their emotions and sympathies. But this letter felt different. Raw and honest in a way that didn't match her usual calculated charm. "She's working 50 hours a week at a diner," I said, "living on ramen noodles and sleeping on an air mattress. If this was manipulation, wouldn't she be playing up the suffering more, asking for help more directly?" "Maybe," Michael said. "Or maybe she's learned that direct manipulation doesn't work with you anymore, so she's trying a subtler approach." I appreciated that he wasn't trying to tell me what to do, just helping me think through the possibilities. This was my decision to make, and we both knew it. I spent the rest of the day thinking about Dad. What would he have wanted me to do? He'd loved both his daughters equally, but he'd also been big on accountability and personal responsibility. He'd probably be proud that I'd finally set boundaries, but he'd also want me to be open to genuine change if that's what this was. That evening, I made a decision. I would meet with Cheryl, but on my terms, in a neutral location. I wanted to see her face when we talked to gauge whether this transformation was real or another performance. I called the number she'd written at the bottom of her letter. She answered on the second ring. "Linda." Her voice was cautious, hopeful. "I got your letter," I said, "and the check. I wasn't sure if you'd want to hear from me." "I'm not sure either," I admitted. but I think we should talk. Can you meet me somewhere? We arranged to meet the next day at Rosie's Diner, a small family-owned restaurant that Dad used to take us to when we were kids. It seemed like appropriate neutral ground somewhere with good memories, but no current emotional stakes. I arrived first, choosing a booth in the back where we could have privacy. When Cheryl walked in 10 minutes later, I barely recognized her. She'd lost weight, her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she was wearing a uniform from the diner where she worked. She looked tired, but somehow more substantial than before, like she was taking up space in her own life instead of just floating through it. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "I wasn't sure you would." We ordered coffee and sat in awkward silence for a few moments. Finally, Cheryl spoke. "I know you don't have any reason to believe me," she said, "but I meant every word in that letter. These past 3 weeks have been the hardest of my life, but also the most important. I had to learn who I was when I couldn't rely on your money or Mom's excuses or my own charm to get by." "And who are you?" I asked. She smiled sadly. "Someone who took advantage of the most generous person she knew. Someone who mistook kindness for weakness and sacrifice for obligation. Someone who was so scared of being average that she convinced herself she deserved extraordinary support." I studied her face, looking for signs of the old Cheryl, the one who could cry on command and say exactly what people wanted to hear. But her eyes were clear and direct, her voice steady. "Tell me about your job," I said. For the next hour, she talked about her new life. The early morning shifts that started at 5 a.m., the difficult customers and aching feet and grease burns on her arms, the roommates who were initially annoyed that she didn't have a TV or expensive furniture to contribute to the apartment, the community college classes she was taking at night, studying subjects she'd never cared about before because she was paying for them herself. "I'm good at the restaurant work," she said, and there was genuine pride in her voice. "I'm fast, and I remember orders well, and customers seem to like me. My manager said she might promote me to shift supervisor if I keep it up." "That's great," I said, and I meant it. "The money I sent you," she continued, "that was my first month's tips plus some overtime pay. I know it's not much compared to what I owe you, but I wanted you to see that I'm serious about this, about changing, about taking responsibility, about earning the right to be your sister again." I felt tears starting to form and blinked them back. "Cheryl, you don't have to earn the right to be my sister. You already are my sister. What you had to earn was my respect and my trust." "Have I started to?" she asked quietly. I thought about everything she'd told me, about the exhaustion in her voice when she talked about working double shifts, about the pride when she mentioned her manager's praise. This wasn't the spoiled, entitled person who had destroyed my wedding. This was someone who was learning, growing, becoming the adult she should have been years ago.
"Yeah," I said finally.
"I think you have." We talked for another hour about everything and nothing. She asked about my honeymoon, apologized again for ruining it, and listened without defensiveness when I explained how hurt and betrayed I'd felt. I told her about the relief I'd experienced when I stopped supporting her financially, how much stress had lifted from my life. "I'm glad," she said. "I never wanted to be a burden to you, but I didn't know how to stop being one. Cutting me off was probably the best thing you could have done for both of us." When we finally left the diner, I felt something I hadn't experienced with my sister in years: hope. Not the naive hope that everything would magically go back to normal, but the realistic hope that we might be able to build something new and healthier between us. "I'd like to stay in touch," I told her as we stood beside our cars in the parking lot. "Maybe we could have lunch again next week." Her face lit up in a way that reminded me of the little girl she used to be before entitlement and resentment had hardened her features. "I'd love that," she said. "And Linda, thank you for giving me a chance to show you who I'm becoming. I won't waste it." As I drove home, I thought about the check still sitting on my kitchen table. I could deposit it, keep it as partial repayment for years of financial support. or I could do something else entirely. When I got home, I sat down and wrote Cheryl a check for $3,000 with a note, "For your emergency fund. Every adult needs one. I'm proud of you for working so hard." I mailed it the next day, knowing that she'd probably try to refuse it, but hoping she'd understand the message behind it. This wasn't charity or enabling. This was an investment in the person she was becoming, a sign that I believed in her transformation. 6 months later, Cheryl graduated from community college with honors and was promoted to assistant manager at her restaurant. She moved into her own studio apartment and bought a used car with money she'd saved from working overtime shifts. On my first wedding anniversary, she sent Michael and me a beautiful card with a simple message, "Thank you for showing me what real love looks like." It's not about giving someone everything they want. It's about believing they can become who they're meant to be. I keep that card on my desk at work, a reminder that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is let them fall so they can learn to stand on their own. My relationship with Cheryl isn't perfect, and we're still rebuilding trust that was damaged over years of unhealthy patterns. But it's real now in a way it never was before. And I think Dad would be proud of both of us. Me for finally learning to set boundaries, and Cheryl for finally learning to respect them. The hardest lesson I learned from all of this is that enabling someone isn't love. It's fear. Fear that they can't handle life without your help. Fear that they'll stop loving you if you stop giving them what they want. Fear that you're not valuable unless you're solving someone else's problems. Real love means believing that the people you care about are capable of growth, of change, of becoming their best selves. Sometimes that means stepping back and letting them figure it out on their own, even when it's painful to watch. Sometimes love means saying no, setting boundaries, and trusting that the people who truly belong in your life will rise to meet your expectations rather than disappearing when the free ride ends. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, love means watching someone you've given up on surprise you with their strength, their resilience, and their capacity for change. That's the kind of love worth fighting for, worth waiting for, and worth rebuilding a relationship around. What do you think? Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between helping someone and enabling them? Have you found yourself supporting someone who took your generosity for granted? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below about how you've handled similar family situations. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life experiences about family relationships and finding the courage to set healthy boundaries. And don't forget to share this with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes we all need a reminder that saying no can be the most loving thing we do. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you navigate your own challenging family dynamics with wisdom and strength.